Welcome to this time of remembrance. And what a time it's been. COVID-19 has caused a health, financial, and economic problem that we've never ever faced before. About a year ago, Her Majesty made two very important statements. The first was to thank key workers and essential workers for all they're doing to keep our society together. And secondly, at the 75th anniversary celebrations for the end of World War II, she reminded us that future generations will look back and say that our efforts were just as heroic as those experienced during the war. And my, hasn't it been tough? Older people, people of minority ethnicity, disabled people have died in numbers unimaginable. Women and young people have borne the brunt of the social crisis. But now, with 1 or 2 or 3 vaccines on the horizons and the great uptake, things are getting better. We're spending more, the economy is recovering, jobs are being created. As Her Majesty said, we will meet again. In this film, we will hear from a number of people, frontline workers and leaders from different sectors of the city, sharing how the pandemic and lockdown has impacted us all. There will be times of reflection and music, and we will come together to share in a minute of silence to remember those who have died and all we have lost. So thank you for taking some time with us to reflect on this difficult year.
This has been an incredibly challenging year for Bristol, and so many people across the city have experienced loss. And that's what this is about, recognising that loss. Young people have lost education, people have lost jobs and a sense of financial security. People have lost home as a safe place. We've had increasing levels of abuse of both adults and children. And ultimately, people have lost loved ones. And on top of that, they have not had the opportunity to grieve as they would have wished. They haven't had their friends and families at the funerals. They haven't had someone to put their arm around them and to cry with them as they come to terms with the loss of that loved one. It's really important that we as a city come together in the face of that to support each other through that loss. I've carried a proverb with me since I was a young person, and it says that we don't despise our sufferings because sufferings produce perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. And that spoke to me as a young person growing up. No one wants suffering when it's there. No one wants trials. But if we can find the support we need at the right time, if we can find the allies, the friendships, then those trials can become the basis for discovering an ability to persevere that we perhaps didn't know we had. That turns into character, and that character becomes hope. And when we look back in years to come, we wouldn't have wished the pandemic upon us, but maybe we'd have discovered something about Bristol that without the pandemic we would never have discovered otherwise. And the character that comes from that becomes the basis of Bristol being a city of hope.
So everybody knows just how hard the pandemic has hit care homes. In the first wave, over 50% of all deaths in Bristol were in care homes, and the second wave has been just as hard, and the loss that has been experienced can be seen in so many different ways. From not being able to see your loved ones, to the loss of touch, that most elemental of senses, and the barriers that the PPE and particularly the masks put up for staff talking to residents and trying to interact. The disconnection and the anxiety that people have felt, whether that be families not knowing what the best thing to do is, whether they should visit or not, for staff worrying about coming into a situation that they don't know what will happen, and also in the midst of sometimes quite serious outbreaks, but just coming in anyway. I think it's a huge testimony to them, their skills, their dedication and their loyalty. Trying to cope with so many different guidance notes, initiatives, PPE, testing, a very different world for the normal world of care homes. But there is hope, and we're feeling it very strongly now. The hope of the vaccine, so that people can come back and relatives can come back and visit. And I can't emphasise just how important that is. And throughout it all, even the worst and the darkest of days that we've had over the last year, there has still been laughter, there have still been smiles, and there has still been love. And that's what will take us forward.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May peace and blessings be upon you all. There's no doubt that we have all suffered in the last 12 months from this dreadful COVID pandemic. There has been irreversible tragedies from where we have lost members of our family, our friends, people that we know in our neighbourhood, this city, UK and globally. Ordinarily, we would come to our mosques 5 times a day. On Friday, large congregations. We would sit with each other, close to each other. We would even shake hands and hug, but that's not allowed in these circumstances. We bring in our bags, we keep in a social distance, we sanitize, we wear gloves where we need to, we have our own prayer mats, and then we quickly offer the prayers and return home. But we are, as a community, more resilient. We have supported one another through social media, through the imams and the teachers, through prayers for each other. And our mosques have played a pivotal role in explaining to our communities the importance of all these safety measures. There's been an immense outpour of support for those who need help. And we have come together with mosques and organizations, Muslim and non-Muslim communities, working together to help those people in need, the homeless. We have also provided meals to NHS staff, frontline staff. We have worked with schools. We aim to remain united and work closely to support one another, not only in this neighbourhood, but throughout the whole of the city.
As a humanist funeral celebrant, I've worked with families whose grief is compounded by not being able to have the funeral they want, with all the friends and family there to celebrate a life and mourn a death. In normal times, I would spend time with families at their home, listening to their stories, being shown photos of their mum or dad, brother or sister, and while they talked and laughed and wept, I would be truly alongside them while the ceremony they wanted became clear to us. And by the time I wrote the tribute based on their stories, I would feel as if I'd known the person they loved, who this ceremony was for. Listening, support and empathy are at the heart of what humanist celebrants do. It's harder with Zoom meetings and small socially distanced weddings or funerals, but I've been privileged to create some wonderful ceremonies with lovely people, just as always. I often think of empathy and reason as the twin pillars of humanism, and both have kept me going during this last year. Support from friends and family shared down the phone, love glimpsed on screens. Empathy is the pool of strength that helps medics and teachers and carers go back to their work each day. It's here and now and everywhere in our present troubles. As for reason, it's all about learning, discovering, stretching the boundaries of knowledge. And right now it's all about science. Following the science hasn't just been the government's mantra. It's been like looking down a long tunnel, waiting for the light to appear at the end. And it did. It has. Scientists have just been mind-blowingly brilliant. For me, that represents the best of being human. And it brings hope this springtime for a return to life as we know it, full of love and joy and celebration.
I'm the head teacher of an amazing school, and it has been probably the most phenomenally difficult year that we have ever experienced because of COVID-19. I think we've had 5 different configurations of attendance, and that's meant we've had to change things constantly, send communications almost every day. And how we have managed that as a team has been truly amazing. Staff don't complain, they just get on with their jobs and then some. And I think we have done an incredible job this year. Teachers, support staff, office staff, site staff, they all pull together each day to do the very best for our pupils. The kids have been absolutely brilliant as well. I just cannot believe how much they have had to cope with this year. One week they're in, one week they're not. One minute they're trying to get used to remote learning, and then maybe they've had to do their own periods of self-isolation. And perhaps even they've had deaths in their own families caused by COVID-19. I know from personal experience how that can feel. I lost my own father-in-law to COVID just before Christmas. It has been an incredibly difficult time, both for their mental health and for their education. Yet when they are here, they come back with such smiles and such energy and such zest for life that it keeps us going, it keeps our team together, and everything we do is for the good of them. And I know for a fact that schools all over the city have replicated this. They have worked tirelessly, they've gone above and beyond, and they have never given up on their pupils. And I know that we will continue to do everything we can to help our pupils succeed in Bristol.
So we're a church here, based here in Stokes Croft in the heart of the city. It's been obviously a really challenging year for everyone. For us, we found ourselves no longer able to gather on Sundays, which meant a real scattering and a time of adapting to the new technologies that we were using to communicate and connect. And we've just seen it's been very hard for lots of members of our congregation, lots of separation and isolation, and certainly fear for the first part of the year. But we found lots of gems in all of that challenge. We found opportunities to reach out to our neighbours and our friends, and certainly the community here around Stokes Croft. It's been a time of real learning, and we've found a resilience that we didn't know we've had, and an ability to adapt that we didn't know we had as well. As difficult as it's been, we've been able to really love and care for our community, for those that have really been hurting in this time, and really draw closer to them. We've especially been able to really support some of the most vulnerable members of our community through the homeless work that we do here in the church, and through food packages in all kinds of practical ways. Looking back across the year, we found that actually the church has a strength to it in times of darkness. It has hope for people. My hope is that when we get together again, we'll gather together with a real sense of value for one another and for the opportunities that we have to serve this city.
So COVID's been a real challenge for us at the bus company. We have lost our customers, lost our business, and if it wasn't for the fact that we were being funded, we would have no business left. So we have been keeping our services going, not for profit, but to make sure that our city keeps moving, make sure key workers can get to hospital or to wherever they're going, kids can go to school. But it's been really tough, and we unfortunately lost 2 of our members of staff in Bristol to COVID at the beginning, which was really, really hard. They'd been here a long time and we still miss them now. Our drivers feel it the most. They are out seeing the empty buses, seeing the empty streets, seeing the shops that aren't open or have closed down. And the morale has been really tough to keep up because of that, because actually the best part of being a bus driver is to get to talk to people and see your regulars and take them to their normal places of work or school or to the pub. And that's been really tough. But we have managed to do some really exciting things with technology. We now can see on our app whether a bus has 5 or 10 people on it, and that gives people confidence in travelling. We've introduced tap and cap into Bristol so that people can start to switch over to contactless and stop using cash. which has all been about safety, but is really positive for our city even after COVID. And our drivers, who are really good at taking that temperature of the city, are starting to see things get better, feel the mood improve, and slowly but surely start to return to a place where hopefully in a few months' time, it'll be much more like normality.
The lives of the young people in Bristol and indeed the UK have been completely changed by the COVID pandemic. We are statistically most likely to have been furloughed or in fact have lost our jobs altogether. We faced exams and uncertainty around what our grades would be and had to sit exams that I don't think anyone could have ever predicted. Our mental health has been the subject of a lot in the news, with referrals increasing all the time. And it has completely changed the lives that we thought we were leading. That is why I think it is most important that young people have one of the biggest voices at the table when we're thinking about COVID recovery. Young people have so much to bring to the discussion from their experiences, so it's so important that as some of those most affected by COVID, we have some of the largest voices at the table when we're deciding how to build back better. However, it's not all doom and gloom, and one of the best things to come out of the first lockdown, and I hate we can say first lockdown, is that Avon and Somerset Police actually got in contact and wanted to tell us how well the young people of Bristol have been doing at following the guidelines, despite what the media will probably have you believe. That is why it's so important that we continue to do this, to dispel the perception that we're part of the problem and make sure we're always part of the solution.
Up here, the suburbs broadcast over hot air tonight. A beat, a cry, a siren. The evening is close and still as a cyclone's eye. We loop Ridgeway Field once again, where the dogs disturb us with their closeness. White flags of carrier bags are silent in the dead calm of branches. At the top of the steps, a red flare arcs overhead as applause begins to swell over rooftops. Here on this ridge, one man and two dogs become wide-eyed flotsam strewn on some unfamiliar coast. Our gazes awash on the city's horizon, the dark graph of its buildings, its deep, unfathomable tides.
We're in Hartcliffe, which is in the top 1% of deprivation in England. We support people and families whose lives have been blighted by addiction. It's been very difficult for us not being able to give the support that is needed in the community because we know that there is an increase in issues around problematic drinking, domestic violence and isolation, which has led to mental health illnesses. Even before COVID struck, this community was lacking a lot of amenities. People have lost so much. They've lost their support, their connections, the community and the services they depended on. In this building alone, the people in this area lost the support of a solicitor drop-in, domestic abuse services, a library and the use of computers and technology, which an awful lot of people in this area don't have at home. For us in the voluntary sector, it's been very difficult with COVID, dealing with the people that we deal with. Unfortunately, we lost the personal touch by not being able to do face-to-face support. But people believe in us and believe in what we are trying to achieve. People supplied us with technology so we could build a connection with people in this community. And this is what it's all about, is making connections with people and trying to improve people's lives. Right across Bristol, the voluntary sector is working together so much more. And together we can get through this situation. This building we are in is one of the hubs of this community, and it's just tragic to see it so quiet and unused as it has been for the last 12 months. Hopefully, in the near future, this will be the hub of the community once again.
I really love my job. I love dealing with people. I love mixing with our communities. I'm really proud to be a police officer in Bristol. That's why the last 12 months has been really difficult for us as police officers, because we've had to change the way we police. We haven't really loved giving out tickets. We haven't really loved telling people to socially distance, to stay inside. So we've become almost as though we're restricting people's freedom of movement. And that has been really stressful for us, especially as the community police officers, as neighbourhood teams, because we come from a place of policing by consent, but we understand the bigger picture that we do have to look after everybody in our community. And it's down to us to enforce people if they're not listening. So since lockdown, the types of crime has been changing, the antisocial behaviour, obviously all of that stopped, and then we could really focus on the more serious crimes. We have the strategies in place to support victims of domestic abuse as well as safeguarding children. So that was a big thing. One of the things that I do remember is how lovely the general public were by bringing us donuts and cakes and giving us hot drinks. It really felt as though they were behind us and they were really supportive. So a big part of our job now is education, because I think that's the best way to avoid enforcement. And I'm really proud that here in Bristol, people have really listened and taken on board this message, and we're going to get through this.
We've lost in the last year, not just people before their time, but also we have lost people's businesses, but above all people's livelihoods. People have lost their jobs. It's put huge strain on people in ways I think we haven't witnessed before, and I've had the privilege to see how people have adapted. It's been incredible to see the number of ways that people have changed what they do, how they do it, but they've also taken, I think, often time and responsibility beyond what they do to help other people in business, other people in their neighbourhoods. And I think got people thinking about, not just about their businesses, but about health, about the environment, about the place, and that the people around them they need to look after. And I've witnessed working around virtual tables with people from all walks of our city, of different faiths, from different organisations, public, private, voluntary, all pulling together to try and see how we can help each other. And I think business has in many ways stepped up to the plate and found different ways of using its money, but sometimes its resource, its know-how, its knowledge, its energy to try and help people, particularly people that are impacted most by this terrible virus. As we look forwards, businesses in Bristol have both got a need and a responsibility really to support particularly our younger people who are going through their studies or actually haven't got the opportunity and need access to either experience of work, to get into work, or to create their own business. Bristol is strong and its businesses are determined to succeed and to try and find different ways of operating into the future.
This year has been a really tough year for everybody. I personally have lost friends and people that I know to this horrible pandemic. But I also remember standing on the pavement and clapping for the NHS on a Thursday night, which was amazing and brought everybody together. As Lord Mayor, we have the Lord Mayor's Medals, which we give out every year. And this year, we have decided to remember individuals and groups who've gone the extra mile through the pandemic. We've awarded a medal to a young man who ran around the streets dressed as Spider-Man, raising money, but also bringing joy to young people. We've remembered ladies who have knitted teddy bears for the emergency services to hand out when people have experienced great trauma, to bring them a little bit of comfort. We're also remembering groups of people who have cooked meals for others and also provided translation services for minority groups who need that extra level of support for information about how to cope with the pandemic. So what I've learned from this last year is that Bristol is the most fantastic place and we have so much resource and skill and love and community here that we need to be celebrating all that is fantastic about this city.
As we look back and remember this year, I'll always remember it as the hardest year of my career. And I've only got through that by working with an incredible team. That team across health and social care, across the NHS, in Bristol and its wider area, but also across the whole country and the globe, have come together in incredible ways to fight this virus. I work in intensive care. We've been intensive in our treatment this year. We've researched this virus, we've created new treatments, we've delivered a vaccine, much of the research done here in Bristol, and that's been incredible. The hard work and determination of my colleagues has been amazing, but we haven't always been successful, and that's something we must remember. We haven't been able to save everyone's life, and that's where the other part of my job comes in, the care, because while we haven't saved everyone's life, we have been able to care for everyone. And nobody's been left alone. No one's been left to die alone. I'll remember all of the patients that I treated as people, not as a statistic. I'm going to remember those people I spoke to, those hands that were held. When this first started, we had no idea whether it was going to affect healthcare workers more than others, but my colleagues strapped on their masks and their PPE and they went to care for the patients as they have been taught and trained to do. And in fact, we have lost colleagues. We've lost colleagues from this hospital, we've lost colleagues across the NHS, and we will remember them, and I will remember them, and I will also remember how brave people were, how courageous. And I hope that while we look back on this year with great sadness, we can look forward with some optimism that the sun's going to rise again. There will be hope, but we're never going to forget those who worked hard and those we lost in this year.
Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. You got to hold on just a little while longer. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. You got to pray on just a little while longer. Pray on just a little while longer. You got to pray on just a little while longer. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. got to fight on just a little while longer. Fight on just a little while longer. You got to fight on just a little while longer. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. You got to hold on just a little while longer. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright.
Bristol Cathedral is a place of memories. Above me is the memorial to citizens, ordinary women and men who served their neighbours as the city was ravaged by 77 air raids. Over 1,000 were killed, another 1,000 seriously injured, and their families were divided as children were evacuated and many families were left without homes. Over the last year, we too have been traumatized by the silent, invisible killer that is COVID-19. And there have been so many deaths, we do not yet know the detail. As we have heard the news, we have not been able to reach out to hold each other or join together in even momentary celebration when a baby is born or a couple marry. As a community, we have not been present when someone who is precious to us and to God has died. We have not been able to care for their bodies as we might have wanted. We have not been able to gather to celebrate lives by telling their life stories. We have not been able to commend them to God. The Christian faith holds precious the story of a man called Lazarus, who became very ill. His sisters sent for Jesus, who arrived too late. Lazarus was dead. The women were angry with him. If only you had been here, our brother would not have died. They are deeply ashamed that they could not save their brother. Their outburst is followed by the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. Our culture does not encourage weeping. The citizens above me, from the Home Guard to the volunteer nurses, are depicted as heroic and stoic, though they no doubt grieved in private. In our recent days, we have witnessed the healthcare workers of the pandemic weeping on the intensive care wards, so deeply distressed that they could not save their patients. Today, for all those who grieve and all who have died, today we too weep. But today we also sense something new. The change of the seasons, the impact of vaccinations, the schedule for the easing of lockdown, all hold out a hope which we can grasp. There is profound sorrow and darkness that is still deep. But as the Bible promises, there is light ahead. We have been terribly tested, but we have not been overcome. There will be new life. Together, there will be new hope ahead.